I don't know, it was fun. I like that kind of stuff. I liked being out there, me in control of things and having a little bit of a say as to how things worked out. And then ultimately being able to turn media from maybe they were pessimistic or negative towards the military and change their perspective.
This is the Oath We Took podcast, and you just heard a piece of Brian's story. You now know one more Marine and one more piece of Marine Corps history. His sacrifices matter. His stories matter. Not every Marine story is the same. We didn't all join the military for the same reason. What is the same is the oath we all took. An oath that easily could have ended in death, and for some, it did. So listeners, instead of asking you to thank a Marine for their service, I am so excited for today's conversation, and I'm probably going to get a little emotional even at the beginning because you're the exact reason to why I wanted to start this podcast. You were probably one of the most impactful and influential leaders that I had in the Marine Corps. And I knew that when I first asked you to be on the podcast that you would probably say no or hesitate. And that was the type of stories that I wanted people to feel comfortable to tell, because I feel like so often those are the individuals and Marines who don't realize the impact they have on their Marines and then that impact that it has on the Marine Corps. So thank you so much for finally agreeing to be on the podcast.
Of course.
And
Yeah, I don't know what to do with compliments. So
no, I am the same way. But I felt like I had to start with that because, again, like when we were going through the whole process and the conversation, it was just like, if I can get Kester on this, then like I have achieved, like that is the goal. Because again, you're like the type of individual that this is why I created the podcast. There's so many of us who just don't tell our stories because we don't think we did anything exceptional or grand or epic or all of these things. And it's just like the impact you made. That's what this is about. And so thank you so much for joining me.
yeah, glad to be here.
Yes. And the first question I always start with, which is, why did you decide to join the Marine Corps?
The simple start of it is, I met a girl. I said this at my retirement speech, and I said it to Marines throughout the years. I worked in an architectural firm. I kind of had a glass ceiling. I was getting paid pretty good, but I didn't have an architectural degree. So I was drafting, running prints, taking photos, anything that I could to help the greater good in the office. And, in an elevator one day, happenstance, I met currently my wife, and we started talking and found out that this is a person that I want to be with. And after a period of time, I realized that she made me, as corny as it sounds, want to be a better person. Because I don't think I was doing a lot good at the time. I was, hanging out, partying, doing that kind of stuff. I was in my late 20s, 27, I think I was. And yeah, we ended up hitting it off. And after about, gosh, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years, something like that, we moved in together. And then it kind of led to the second piece of why I joined, because her making me realize that I wanted to be a better person, kind of came to fruition as we're on our way to work one day. We're working in the same building. We're sitting in traffic in Tulsa, Oklahoma, on the way in, listening to the radio, and you hear the news that a plane had hit one of the World Trade Center buildings. And I'm thinking to myself, because about 2 weeks prior to that, so I think it was a baseball player was flying a prop plane in Florida and hit an office building, like a 6-story building. And I'm thinking, dumbass, like how on earth do you hit a World Trade Center? Those things are huge. Not thinking about the attack that had already happened on there. And really didn't get the full breadth of the impact of that until I got to the office. And it's a place that doesn't close maybe 4 times a year, 4 days a year: Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, 4th of July, that kind of thing. And they don't stop working. But I walked into the office that day, and they had like a little 9-inch tube TV, with the antenna and the aluminum foil on the antenna. and everybody was stopped working and glued to the TV. And I step in there and I see really what it is. That it wasn't a little prop plane. It wasn't just an accident. It was an intentional thing. And I watched that first building fall. And I knew kind of at that point in time that I needed to make some changes in my life and do something a little bit more to be the man I wanted to be for my now wife and for myself and for my country ultimately. And then the last piece of that that really kind of inspired me, it's weird to say it, but was Pat Tillman, the football player from Arizona Cardinals. You know, he kind of carried himself a little bit different. I always liked that watching football. He's just kind of crazy. He'd throw his entire body and everything into every play that he did. But he'd also ride like a mountain bike to work. You know, this is a multimillionaire. But he gave all that up to join the army and be a ranger with his brother. And you know, his story has its own ending, and I'll let history tell that. But yeah, those three pieces right there kind of correlated together and forced me to start looking into something bigger than myself and to try and make a change for the better for myself. And you know, history is what it is now.
I had, and I love this podcast. One of the reasons, especially interviewing people I know, I had no idea you were 27 when you joined the Marine Corps. Is that what you said?
Oh, I was 29. It took me 2 years to get to that point. Yeah, I had to
What?
sign a waiver and everything. You didn't know that?
No, I don't know how I did not know that. So how was boot camp being like
I
that much?
wasn't the oldest person there. There was a kid there who was 34, but he could
Okay.
do like 20 pull-ups and he was in really, really good shape.
And I guess that time frame, I mean, that makes sense for like 9/11 and all of that. But I remember, I think I was like 2 years older than people, and it was such a drastic, like, why are you crying about this? Why is this like emotionally like affecting you? Like there were so many things with it that I was just like, that's not like there was just things that I feel like age and boot camp really makes a huge difference in
Yep.
how you can handle more the emotional and like mental side of it. So I
Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was just I had no idea, and I'm like baffled now.
But you know what's funny is like throughout our MOS, there's over the years, I met probably three more that were 27, 28, 29 when they joined. And almost all of them were female too. That's the other thing. So yeah, that maturity piece plays into it. But the problem is you're, you know, 29, 30 years old competing against 18 and 19-year-olds for, you know, physical goals and stuff like that. It makes it hard. It can be inspirational, but it makes it pretty hard because, you know, an 18-year-old's pretty resilient.
And especially, I think, in that phase of your career where the physical plays, I think, so much more of a ramification because
Yep.
there's not a lot yet to judge besides like the physical and your like initial interaction. So, how was that then at your first duty station?
Yeah, my first duty station was Parris Island, and you know, I did the same job field as you. It was public affairs to start, turned it into communication strategy and operations or comstrat. But you know, Parris Island was probably a pretty good place to go as far as that goes because there wasn't a lot of opportunity to go to the field and those kinds of things. Instead, they placed a lot of responsibility on me, I guess, because I was, I guess, a little bit more mature. I was the media chief for a long time while I was there, writing the big stories, hurricanes coming, like that kind of stuff for the paper. I'm sure they were boring as crap, but they looked to me to write those things. But the media chief was interesting because it was, you know, as the job is, you're kind of alone and unafraid. Um, and you build up your beats like with PMO for you build up your beats and you hold on to that with a fierceness because you've made all these connections, you've networked with people, but then that stuff pays off when you go into a billet like the media chief and you need to set things up quickly or something's happened and you need to get an in and set things up for the lieutenant so that they can do their job as well.
And how did you feel, you know, looking like at Parris Island, looking at the rest of your career? Do you feel like Parris Island being your first duty station set you up really well? Because I feel like a recruiting station, there's just always so much going on. I mean, you can say that about any installation, but there just seems to be like almost a garden hose of like these things have to happen within these, like you said, hurricanes and unexpected things constantly
Mm.
happening.
Well, personally, I think that everybody looks at their first duty station, and this is just my interpretation. I think everybody looks at their first duty station as kind of like McMap. It's your tan belt. It's the base and the foundation for everything that happens from that point. Because all of the leadership experiences you have there, good, bad, and otherwise, are things that you're going to hold on to and carry and try and emulate or try and never repeat again as you progress in your career. And Parris Island was a pretty good place for that. I think we had a really good command. Master Sergeant Prioletta and Major White and Gunny Bortson, a lot of the people that I met there, the younger Marines, Shemansky, who I still know to this day, all those Marines, it was just a good experience. We had fun. We tried to have fun and we challenged each other to put, strange words into a story to see what the gunny would do, those kinds of things, and um, try and come up with a really cool idea and dominate the paper that week or whatever the case may be. But it set a pretty good standard that you end up kind of following throughout your time. And it's I don't know. It was great. They gave us a lot of leeway. They let me do a lot of things. I mean, one time as a media chief, I think it was the History Channel in tow, and I was going out to the rifle range to find a Staff Sergeant Vigiani, who had done all of these incredible things in Afghanistan. And, I'm walking out there, I'm a corporal, and I'm walking on the range. It's full of recruits and the supporting staff. And this staff sergeant obviously wasn't tied into the fact that we were coming out there that day. So he proceeds to just lay into me. And okay, so I go to parade rest and I'm standing there and he's just yelling in my face about why are you out here? Who are these people? I look back at my media and they're kind of like, do we need to leave? Like, and I just stand there. And as soon as he's done, I said, respectfully, Staff Sergeant, I understand where you're coming from, and I'm sorry that this is the situation that you're in. However, I still need to talk to that guy. And we went over and had our interview with Staff Sergeant Vigiani and left. So, I really like doing the job, and I found the fact that, sometimes you're going to have to take a little bit to make the job happen, especially with our job. Because more often than not, especially in the early parts, nobody wanted to see the camera guy coming. Today's day and age, I think everybody kind of likes it a little bit more, is a little more accepting of it and understands the value of it a lot more than they did back then. But I don't know, it was fun. I like that kind of stuff. I liked being out there, me in control of things and having a little bit of a say as to how things worked out. And then ultimately being able to turn media from maybe they were pessimistic or negative towards the military and change their perspective. And like a lot of educator workshops, we'd have people who come there and be like, I didn't even want to come. And by the time they leave, and they're like, I don't even want to leave. These kids are great. I love it. This is amazing what y'all do. They think we throw them out at the front lines in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they're just bullet catchers. And what they actually are is turning into strong young men and women and fulfilling their dreams and expectations and using the Marine Corps to help them see that and do that. Same as I did. So a
And I
lot of
think
9/11 stories came out that time too.
and I think that was one of my favorite things about the MOS too, and the challenges and starting like working for a newspaper, I think was a huge, like, just in the career field, I think a big advantage of, like you were saying, like just those like trying to be funny or finding those ways to like push the envelope, however, or seeing that transformation or the people's thoughts, or even having conversations that I think we were perceived that we weren't going to be able to have with like media or educators, like you were saying, because that happened a lot more often than I thought, where it was like people really just wanted to be able to have an honest conversation and then their
Yes.
perceptions would change.
Well, if you can have that honest conversation before they turn on the camera and put it onto somebody, it helps them make a better story in the end, as opposed to their perceived narrative and what they want to see or whatever the case may be. You can change that a little bit, and it gives them a more rich, more well-rounded story. Because I don't want them to not tell the negative side in their perspective, but I want them to show everything in between, all of that stuff.
And that's, I
It was a
think,
lot of fun.
and I think that's a skill set too, that when you're looking at our MOSY, like I think we kind of have some responsibilities a little more than like our peers in other MOSs, because like you said, like there's a lot of times you're alone and unafraid, just like doing the
Yeah.
job, just out there. So from Parris Island, where was your next duty station?
So the infamous marketing and public affairs, they've changed the name of it now, but that's what it was called back then. I went to Fort Worth. I re-enlisted thinking I wanted to go see the Fleet Marine Corps because everybody tells you no matter where you go, this isn't the fleet. Wait till you get to the fleet. And so I re-enlisted trying to get Okinawa, which gave my wife 2 weeks of sleepless nights, worrying about that in Second Marine Division and somewhere else. I wanted to get with the dudes on the ground doing the job, with the Marines on the ground doing the job. And the headquarters of Marine Corps had other plans. And they said, yeah, that's nice. You can be an MPA here, here, or here. And it was like Houston, Fort Worth, or like Kansas City or something like that. And Fort Worth was about 4 hours away from where I grew up and my family and support from my wife. And I figured the job was going to be a huge time suck. So we went to Fort Worth. It was not a bad place to be. I'm a huge Dallas Cowboys fan. And, I was right there. They were right there in my backyard. And it worked out pretty good. It was an interesting duty station. The only real negative that I can think back on was I got promoted to sergeant 2 weeks after getting there, which one was 2 weeks past when I wanted to get promoted before I left Parris Island. Didn't make that goal, but I didn't have any Marines for 3 years as a sergeant. And sergeant is God on the minds and lips of Marines everywhere, in my estimation. And I didn't get to have a lot of those experiences. Selfishly, I didn't get to have those experiences. But it worked out great. Another one of those situations where you walk into a unit and every recruiting substation, they see who you are and where you've been because of the uniform you're wearing. And I had like 3 ribbons. I had no operational experience sitting right here telling my story. And so they doubted me right up from the front, and I had to earn their respect at every step. And I kind of liked that. I liked that challenge. I liked going in there like, yeah, media visits. No, we're not going to do that. And be like, cool, I'm going to go do that for you. You can be a part of it or you cannot. You sit there and continue eating your Fritos, and I'm going to go make some things happen for you. And then the next time I come back, we'll be like, hey, man, can we get back out to that station? And, they turned the corner. I really enjoyed doing that part. And, you talked about wondering if you make a difference. So I still have no idea. I mean, you've told me, Ramos called me at one point in time. I've had Marines tell me that here and there. I mean, like that elephant painting that's down there is from one of the Marines that made that for me. Little things, I can hold on to that and endure a lot of crap trying to get to the next little thing that's going to help me get past everything else. So, yeah, but Fort Worth, it was interesting, but I had decided towards the end of my time there that I wanted to get out. I wanted to transition out of the Marine Corps. And I had 6 months past my time to rotate. So my contract went 6 months past when I was due to leave that duty station. So I called the monitor and, I'm talking to him. I'm like, hey, I see that I've got, a little bit of time. Can I just finish out my contract here? And he's like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. So another one of those, Marine Corps has other ideas. And, thank God he did what he did because it worked out really well for me. But, he's like, you can re-enlist and we'll send you to Okinawa for 3 years, or you can extend, a year and a half, and we'll send you somewhere CONUS in the continent of the United States, somewhere like Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort. I'm like, well, okay, I've been to Beaufort before. I know my wife likes it there, so let's do that. And I ended up at Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort, where I got Marines again, and a blessing and a curse all at the same time. But yeah, it's awesome experience. I had some really creative minds there, some interesting people, and some driven people, and people that wanted to make a difference.
The Oath We Took podcast, hosted by Marine Corps veteran Tab Bartley, tells the Marine Corps story through the Marines who served. While every story is unique, the common bond is the oath they all took. Tune in Mondays at 5 p.m. Eastern on Wreaths Across America Radio to catch these engaging conversations. Tab is also supporting the Military Women's Memorial through her Wreaths Across America sponsorship page. For every veteran's wreath you sponsor at wreathsacrossamerica.org/The Oath We Took, $5 will go directly to the Military Women's Memorial, the leading memorial and education center honoring the commitment, contributions, and experiences of servicewomen. Once again, to donate, go to wreathsacrossamerica.org/The Oath We Took.
And
It was an excellent change.
is that when your guys' family started to expand, when you started having children? I'm really bad with like time frames.
Well, when I was at Parris Island, my wife was pregnant. Hannah was born July 6th
Okay.
in 2006. Yeah, and so when we were leaving Fort Worth, my wife was pregnant again, and then so both my kids were born at the Beaufort Hospital,
Okay.
just at separate duty stations. But yeah.
And how was that dynamic? Because I mean, were you guys having, I guess, children and a family before like the rest of your peers were? How was that dynamic?
I honestly, I never really thought about that. I mean, I was always older than everybody else, so it just seemed like
The normal for
kind of
you.
part of the course. Huh?
Said the normal for you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was what we, I knew when I met that girl that I wanted to do better for myself so that I could do better for her and ultimately end up having a family um, down the road. But yeah, things work out how they work out, I guess.
It was just something the other day. I had a conversation with somebody, and I didn't really realize that, like, when I was stationed at Quantico, I was the only one of like my peers who was pregnant or like starting a family, and everybody else was so much higher in rank than me who had families or like who shared that. So it was just like interesting. And it had me thinking then of like, when is this happening to other people in the Marine Corps? And does that, have an impact on their lives and so on and so forth? But so you went back to the Beaufort area. How was
Mhm.
that duty station?
Again, people are telling you, oh, this isn't the Fleet Marine Corps. Wait till you get to the fleet, the swinging with the wing. No, that's it. That's not the fleet. But it was interesting because I was able to help Marines get prepared to deploy and see them deploy and then come back. I had to deal with some troublemakers and things like that there, which it was all on me to have to deal with a lot of that stuff. Um, and I figured it's my responsibility. If they're gonna find themselves in trouble, then I'm gonna make sure that I see them through it all the way through. I can only deal with the situation that's in front of me and try and help them out. But it was nice. I love having Marines, all of it, the good stuff, the bad stuff, and everything in between. And you hope that you can help them and provide, some direction to point them in the right direction where they can find success in their life, no matter what ends up happening. Whether they fall here or fall there. Because I mean, hell, when I was at Parris Island, I got arrested. It wasn't totally an accident, but I got arrested because I forgot to pay for gas. Pulling up to a gas thing, pumping, pulling away, and then going inside and forgetting to actually pay for the gas. I paid for sodas and then left, and then got arrested when I came back that night. I use that story all the time as, hey, you've got to pay attention to the small details and use those small mistakes to learn from as you're progressing throughout your life, because small mistakes can have big consequences. Thus, I ended up getting arrested, but that ended up all getting dropped, and I worked all that stuff out. But yeah, Beaufort was nice, and then from there, yeah, I got used to having Marines for about a year, and then an opportunity came up to deploy. I attached 30 days prior to deployment with a MARSOC unit. And for our job, attaching to a unit 30 days before they deploy and go overseas is seems like it's probably pretty rough. And it was, because I didn't know anybody. I don't know how they operate, especially MARSOC. They have whole different rules, a lot more money, a lot more interesting missions and things like that. But it was fun, just kind of be affable and roll with the punches. And it was an interesting experience. We got there, we were there 2 weeks, and the commander was like, "Hey, great news! We're extended by 2 months," and everybody's just kind of like, okay. But at least you knew it up front. You knew what you were getting. But I kept thinking about that, the real Marine Corps and that kind of experience. And those MARSOC Marines told me the same thing. Yeah, this isn't the fleet. Wait till you get to the fleet. I'm like, the fleet is where you are, man. That's done. I'm done listening to this stuff. And I never really heard it again from that point. But yeah, got back to Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort after 10 months, and it was a different shop. The Gunny McMean at the time, Master Guns McMean, he was transitioning out. Then Lieutenant, now Major Highland was there, and she had a very particular way she wanted to do things. and Master Guns, well, Gunnery Sergeant at the time, training was on his way in, and it was just a different perspective, different leadership style, a lot of different Marines in the shop. But it was a nice experience because you always are going to learn from every one of those experiences.
When do you feel like in your career that you kind of like found your leadership style? Because like for me, you were one of the most like calm, consistent, just like steady, I think is a really good word that like when I think of you and your leadership, it was like it wasn't a you knew what you were going to get pretty much in regards to like how you were going to respond to things, and it was such a, I think at least as a, a junior Marine, it was just very like it was very great to be on, this end of it because at Quantico, I know not talking about Quantico yet, but like I went through so much personally, and to be able to have a leader that was always going to be like this calm and cool, and that it wasn't going to be like this emotional response to things. It was, I don't think I ever met anybody like you in the Marine Corps. I say that in like the most positive way of like, it's just, you were just so calm in your leadership and reassuring. And so where do you feel like, or how do you feel like you developed that? Or is that just like you as a person and who you are?
Well, I think it's probably me as a person. Inside, I'm like a duck underwater. My feet are just kicking, but I don't know. I mean, Parris Island, you get thrust into a lot of situations that are very uncomfortable and that you're not used to. Public speaking was not something that I expected to do in the Marine Corps. Wasn't something I expected to ever be good at, but they needed me to do that, so I had to step in and do that. I had to get over myself and calm down and do it as best I could. Fort Worth, I had to do a lot of that stuff. Like I said, every interaction with Marines that were new, they saw where I had been, and I had to overcome that. And then, in combat, the first time you get shot at, it's kind of like, are they shooting at us? Yes, they are. Oh my goodness, this is kind of like, being in a fist fight. Did I just get hit in the face? Yes, I did. I'm in a fight right now. So you just kind of got to slow things down and think about it as logically as you can and hope to make good decisions. And like I said, I always kind of roll with the punches. Things are going to happen, um, good, bad, and otherwise. And trying not to get upset about it or react emotionally. I mean, I don't know that I'm glad that you think that I did a good job, but I don't think that I ever really did a good job with it. Heck, while I was at Quantico, I went to therapy having to deal with like, yelling at the lawnmower and then taking it in that frustration in and yelling at my wife, and they're looking at me like, "Whoa, what's going on?" But you find ways to deal with that stuff, but there's a lot of situations that you're thrust into, and just trying to react as calmly as possible, I think, is probably going to be the best thing for everybody involved. And we dealt with a lot of stuff at Quantico because that was my next duty station. I went from Beaufort to Quantico, and having had all those experiences, being 10 years average older than my peers, I think helped a lot. Um, I mean, like, for example, there was a time that you got like a ticket or something like that coming on base for an expired tag on your license, but you were waiting for it to come, and you're talking to Capers or Jefferson or somebody about it. And I heard it over the divider, and I stand up and I'm like, Bartley, what are you talking about? What happened? And you told me what happened. Well, 5 minutes later, the first sergeant calls me and is like, proceeds to start yelling at me on the phone. I'm like, look, first sergeant, I know what's going on. This is what happened. She's already got it taken care of. There's no need to worry. And she goes, oh, okay, thanks. And hung up. So things tend to work out, I think, if you remain pretty calm. You can see all of those things. Again, the first time I got shot at that I remember, there was a motor T guy with us, and he was scared. And he's like scared, but it was his birthday. And I'm like, hey, dude, is it your birthday? I'm like, come on, man, get up over here. Let's get between these trucks. We'll take a photo, and just kind of got him to forget about it a little bit. And he started smiling, laughing, and he was okay. And he could go on and do his job at that point in time. But I was scared. It's inevitable. It's like every time you stand up in front of people to talk, you're scared. I don't care who you are. If you're not feeling that, then you're probably doing something wrong. So I don't know if that answers your question as to how I developed my leadership style, but I just figured if I gave a crap about the Marines, everything else would work itself out. And I tried to do that as best I possibly could and be as good at listening as I could and trying to understand. I did not always succeed at that. I know that for a fact. I know there's a couple of Marines that probably disliked me quite a bit, in which I have a lot of regret over that, but I did the best job I could in the situation and for the time and what I felt was the best thing for the unit, the Marine Corps, et cetera, and the Marine ultimately. And, I just tried to follow that kind of give a crap about the Marines and everything else will work itself out kind of thing. And it helped me, I think.
And gosh, I know I'm going to get emotional right now, but that was something that I think for me, so I wouldn't have been able to reenlist if it wasn't for you on multitude of things, from like when I was fighting for hip surgery. And I remember specifically when they denied it because they said it was like what, elective surgery or something like that. And I remember you going to the clinic with me and like, here's little PFC Bartley or Lance Corporal, whatever I was, like in tow behind my staff sergeant. And you're letting me handle it, but then the person like was getting like very, very rude. And I remember it was the first time that I saw like the like just fierce like switch of like, oh shit, like there's the like, oh my gosh. And you advocated for me. I think you were the first person who so like blatantly advocated for me and fought for me in a way that it was just like, wow, like, whoo, it makes me teary. And then, when my reenlistment package was just, I think there was something missing. There were signatures missing, and I was on maternity leave. And I think it was like a few days, like being back. And I remember like you and Height texting me, like, this wasn't on, like, we have to figure out. And like, I think it was like one day how to get all these signatures or something like that. And it was like, I could hardly walk from the epidural still. And it was like, nope, we got this. And it was like at the end of the day, somehow like you and Height had like pushed this through. And it's just like, I can't thank you enough for caring, because you did, and it showed. And I can't speak for everybody, but at least for me and the rest of like my peers, that's how we all felt. And so thank you so much. I know you don't know how to respond to compliments, but thank you very much for that.
That stuff's so easy when we have good Marines. It really is. It makes it super easy to do the job. When you've got people that are getting into trouble and stuff like that, it's a distractor from all of the good Marines and the attention that you can pay to them. It's not that it's not warranted, because that person obviously, whomever they are, has needs, and you have to address those needs. But it's nice to be able to hear that stuff. So thank you. Height was magic though.
She was.
That woman could do a lot of magical stuff. She's pretty good.
She was, but it was, Quantico for me, because that was my first duty station. I absolutely loved Quantico and our team. And I feel like I was so blessed to have that as my first duty station and the leadership, because I felt like because of the team we had, like I had so much growth and was able to grow. And like you said, do things and try things on my own, knowing that like, okay, I know you got quite a few calls on me, but like at least you were going to hear my side of the story of like why I was telling a gunny he couldn't take photos of OC spray or whatever it was. So what were some of the challenges at Quantico and just in general? I feel like there was so much in that time period that was going on at Quantico.
The boss was a pretty good challenge, but we had some interesting public affairs situations that happened there, and some really sad ones that made national news for a significant period of time. Excuse me. That I gotta say, like, if you have good folks, it makes doing the job really easy. So the sergeant that killed 2 people and then killed himself was the one that stands out the most to me. And watching you all respond to that was one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my entire life, because that happened. I don't live on base. Zahn lived on base. Lieutenant Sullivan lived near enough and was, on duty or whatever the case may be. But those two ended up handling the initial reactions from that horrible situation that happened, and started doing, prep and all that. Zahn's live on Fox with Friends that morning. And then I get into the office and you all are like all hands on deck. The phones are ringing off the hook for a week, and you all just handled that stuff like champs. It was awesome to watch. But yeah, that was one of the bigger challenges I remember. And then Quantico is complicated. Parris Island had a lot going on, and they mirrored each other in a lot of ways. But Quantico was super complicated because you had so many different commands from across the Marine Corps and impactful stuff with civilian PA and all of these things that you had to kind of figure out how to deal with. Um, it was a neat experience. It was a good learning experience.
So where was your next duty station after Quantico?
So I went to recruiting, and the thing about recruiting at that time, or about that situation for me, it's another one of those, the Marine Corps had other ideas kind of things for me. I went to the Defense Information School to go to what was then called PAQC, the Public Affairs Officers Qualification Course. And towards the end of the course, you get to go on kind of a field trip to the Pentagon. And it's more for the lieutenants than it is like a staff NCO, because I've been around the block a few times. But towards the end of your visit up there, and you're kind of touring, headquarters Marine Corps Public Affairs, you're sitting at a table with a colonel and the Ockfield sponsor, which is a master gunnery sergeant, and you're kind of telling where you've got orders to, where everybody's going. And the colonel's like, "Hey, Lieutenant, where are you going? Lieutenant, where are you going? Hey, Staff Sergeant, where are you going to?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm awaiting orders to 2MEF, and I'm hoping to be the ops chief down there." And before all of this happened, before you find out that you're going to recruiting, your name is put on a list. It's called the Hearst, HIST, whatever you want to call it, list. Basically, it's a selection for special duty. That's drill instructor, Marine security guard, and recruiting duty. And my name was on that list. And, I had talked to this master guns before, and he had said, "Yeah, don't worry about it. We're going to take care of it. You've already done MPA duty. That's as good as we're concerned as a B billet within our MOS, blah, blah, blah." And so I'm sitting there not worrying about this, not thinking about it. And I have got these orders to 2MEF. Well, the master guns leans around the table and goes, and I'm like, what? So after the meeting was over with, I stand up, have a conversation with this master gunner sergeant, and he's like, "Yeah, headquarters Marine Corps is pushing for this, but we're going to squash it. You know what? Don't worry about it." I'm like, "Okay, you're a master gunner sergeant. I'm staff sergeant. I believe you. Plus, you're the head person in charge when it comes to that, the top enlisted in our job field." And so I finish up school, and I'm checking back in from temporary assigned duty back into Quantico, and I go to see the career counselor. What were those dudes called? What are they called? I can't remember what their job is. The career course, career. Anyways, the guy that kind of helps you reenlist and do all of that kind of stuff. And I'm checking in with him, and I'm like, "Hey, man, I want to go to my professional military education course, like the in-person staff sergeant course." And he's like, "Oh, okay. Well, what's your name?" And I tell him my name. And he's like, "Oh, I've been looking for you." He's like, "It's like March 13th or 14th or somewhere around in there." And he's like, "Yeah, you got a seat at the basic recruiter school, April 14th. You need to be there." And I'm like, "What?" No. But yeah, I ended up not being able to get out of that. The other staff sergeant from our MOS, he ended up getting out over that. Mark Fayloga, and I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I'm sure there's a wealth of extenuating circumstances, but he was no longer in the Marine Corps. He did not want to go on recruiting, and I ended up doing that job. And it was a rough 3 years, to say the least.
Especially
trapped and fighting.
And I was going to say, especially that's when the MOS was changing, right? That's when the start of like our MOS was changing. So essentially you were out of it, because in recruiting, you cannot focus on anything else but recruiting. So you were out of it as the entire career field is changing. How was that aspect of it?
Well, it was interesting. So I stayed in touch with Height periodically throughout that time, trying to keep tabs on what was happening, because we all saw it at Quantico. We saw the Ockfield sponsor from our side and the Ockfield sponsor from the combat camera side getting into it and having heated conversations in the middle of the PX and stuff like that. But yeah, it was inevitable. We knew it was coming, and it was for the betterment, because I don't know how many events did you go to where combat camera was there and you were there, and we're both kind of like looking at each other like, why are we both here doing the same job? So it made a lot of sense, but yeah, it was difficult to kind of come back around to that. And there was a lot of frustration by the 46 side, the combat camera side, and by the public affairs, the 43 side. But I think ultimately it was a good decision, and it made us more viable to commands, and less confused about what we do, even though the name is extraordinarily confusing.
How to
Communication
say
strategy
that?
and operation. That's formerly known as public affairs or combat cameras, what we had to say for like 3 years. But yeah, it was interesting. And again, I like those challenges. I always kind of liked that. And going from recruiting to meth, where I originally thought I was going, it was a nice change of pace. And you get in there, and God, we had so many Marines that I'd probably barely ever saw at 2MEF because they were deployed. I mean, we had like, I don't know, 40 or 50 Marines or something like that total in that shot. May have been more than that. But, over half of them were gone. We had just a big, giant empty building with empty squad bays because there was no Marines to fill them. They're always out in the field, always doing this, always doing that. It was nice. It was a
And
nice change of pace.
and I felt like that was pretty much what everybody wanted to do, like out seeing the stuff going on and being a part of it. Because I know like that was, part of the gripe at Quantico is that, like, well, I can't deploy from here and I can't do these things. And um so was it
Ramos.
yes, Ramos. So was it was the switch then, you said it was a nice change of pace, but what were some of the challenges when you switched from recruiting to kind of like, or was it maybe not as much of a challenge because it had kind of been figured out at that point?
Well, I mean, like, I don't know video, and I realized that when I was at Quantico, we got two video Marines, um, and I had to kind of rely on them to not try and be lazy or cheat and be honest with me, because they knew that I didn't know. So they could tell me, it takes 4 days to edit together a video piece when it really takes 5 hours or something like that. So I quickly tried to establish a lot of that stuff, but I also knew by the time I got there, I was a gunny. By the time I got to MEF, I was a gunny, and I knew that I needed to depend on the sergeants. They knew better than me. They knew a lot more than me, and that's kind of what they're there for, is to run and manage things. So I let them do a lot of that stuff, and it eased a lot of the frustration on my part from things that I didn't know, but it also made me feel good when I had to go sit in a wealth of meetings and listen to people blather on about this, that, and the other, and we have like a 2-second speaking part in the meeting, but you're in there for 2.5 hours kind of thing. So that probably more than anything was frustrating, because I'd gone from being hands-on, taking photographs, hands-on, doing media escorts, hands-on, looking for kids to join the Marine Corps, to suddenly you're planning and sitting in meetings and stuff like that. That was probably the biggest transition there. But there's value to all that stuff. So again, I had to get over myself, and figure it out. And the funny thing is right as I started to figure it out, the chief over at 22nd MU was due to transition, and this guy asked me kind of like in passing one day, "Hey, what do you think about going to a MU?" I was like, that'd be kind of fun. And then he went back and told the monitor he had had a conversation with me, and that I wanted to go to the MU and replace him. And I had orders 2 days later, and I'm like, what the hell is this? I've been at the MEF for like 9 months, and suddenly I've got
Wow.
orders to seabag drag across base and go to the 22nd MU. And I was pissed, I'm a little pissed off about it, because I was starting to figure out my job and had a good hold on it and that kind of stuff. But funny enough, as it works out in the Marine Corps, it worked out pretty good for me. 22nd MU is pretty awesome. I got a really good understanding of how to manage gear and a lot of that stuff, and how to do a lot of things that I had never done before. Like midway through our deployment, on ship, our officer left. He had impacts from Hurricane Florence on his house and some things that he needed to be home to take care of. And so he left. So I was the OIC, and I'm sitting in all these meetings. I'm sure that colonel probably was super frustrated with me because I just didn't know all the stuff. And golly, that guy was very, 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 very intelligent. And I'm kind of a knucklehead when it comes to some things, but it was a tremendous experience. I loved my time with the MU. Um, and then, came back and got selected for Mass Sergeant, got promoted. And I'm like, this is a job for a staff sergeant and a gunny. I don't need to be in this job. So I asked to, find somebody to replace me and send me back to MEF, send me to division, send me somewhere, just don't leave me here. And, I got promoted and I sat in that seat for like 2 weeks and my replacement arrived and I went back to the MEF and spent a little bit of time there. And again, just like my last deployment, when I got back, hey, the leadership had changed. Lieutenant Colonel Armistead wasn't there anymore. Master Guns Kress was still there, but he was on his way out. Master Guns Cardalla was now coming in. And it was just a different change of pace. They put me in a different job, and basically, and we moved offices too. We moved from one rat infested building to another, and it was an interesting challenge the whole way through. And then from there, I went to my last duty station and at Second Marine Division and requested those orders because I'd requested them a long time ago. And, it was open. They needed a staff in COIC. They'd had some leadership issues for about 2 years, enough that the culture was pretty bad over at Division at that time. And, they were trying to do the right things to fix it, but they just didn't have a lot of upper level officers and staff NCOs to go into some of those spots. So they'd shift people over there and then they'd leave. Like Master Guns Crest went over there for a little bit, and he's great at changing culture because that dude just likes to have fun. Even when he's very serious, he's still messing around. It always seemed like to me, but knew what he was doing. 1,000% knew how to do the job really well. And so, I checked in over at Second Marine Division and with a boss who was very old school and had a very particular way of doing things. And I love that because you said you knew what you could expect with me. Well, I knew what I could expect with this guy, and it was going to be very old school mentality. Lead from the front, that kind of thing. That was his philosophy. And I loved the fact that I knew what I was going to get every day, and he trusted me. I trusted him. Didn't mean we always agreed on everything, and that's okay. But it was a great experience, and we slowly started changing that culture over there, and working through some issues, and some of the last remnants of people that were there. 2 years prior were checking out when I got there, and then COVID happened, and like it changed everything for the rest of the time from that point on. I mean, you remember when y'all were working from your rooms?
Yes, because of the mold.
Yeah,
Deployed in
it was like
Quantico.
that. It was like that, except for people couldn't go anywhere. God, that was just super interesting time because you had a lot of medical things that you had to overcome. And then there's the op tempo, and ops never stops, right? So all those Marines are just constantly going to the field, coming back, processing information, submitting it, publishing it, going right back to the field, coming back, and trying to, help the eager Marines not overdo it, burn themselves out, and everybody else. I mean, we had a Marine check in who was pregnant. There was some apprehension towards accepting this Marine there, and I'm like, look, we can't say no. So bring the Marine in. We'll figure out how to get them in a place where they can find success for themselves. And that girl ended up being the media chief when she left. So I loved that job. That was a great way to go out. Again, the elephant painting, that's from one of the Marines at Second Marine Division. It was a great duty station. Huge pain in the butt. Huge, awesome amount of success came from there. But what a great duty station it was.
What made you, when you finally made the decision to get out of the Marine Corps, like what was that decision? Like, how did you know that it was like your time to leave the Marine Corps?
Well, having come in at 29 years of age, I was due at 20. I'd be 49, 50 years old. And I always said, am I still having fun? And how do my knees feel? Well, I was still having fun, but my knees are hurting all the time. They hurt bad. My shoulders hurt. Um, they still hurt. But like Master Guns Cardello is, you got a case of AGE. Well, yes, but when it's keeping you up at night and you're not able to do the things like I couldn't run anymore. I was rowing for every one of my PFTs. I was old enough, that's fine. But it just kind of felt like I was holding people back, and there's a younger, stronger Mass Art or Master Guns out there that was more deserving of the spots that I would take. And I didn't feel it was right for the next generation of Marines and those individuals that would take those spots to keep holding things up. Kind of what it felt like.
And now that you've
Plus,
plus.
my wife had found a job that she absolutely loved, and if I'd reenlisted again, I know they were probably going to send me overseas, and I did not want to take her out of that situation. My daughter's about to graduate; she graduates in a month. My son was getting established in school, and I want to make sure give them some stability. I think that was the other factor on there.
And I was gonna ask how like that part of the transition is, because what I will say too is your wife is a phenomenal woman. And I remember when Jacob was deployed, and I think it was Odin's first birthday, like her mailing like books to us, or like randomly just texting and seeing like how we were doing, how things were, and just like just an amazing support all around from your guys' family. And so how is it being able to like have all this time for your family and not having to like sacrifice things? How is that now, like with retirement?
It's really strange because I still have that drive to want to contribute, and I live, 45 minutes south of the base of Camp Lejeune, and you see Marines every day. I've got Marine neighbors, and I miss it. I miss it a lot. I don't regret the decision to retire, not in the slightest bit. But yeah, the day to day interaction with the young Marines, the Marines at division joke that I could take a 5 minute conversation, make it 45 minutes. And I know I'm very guilty of that. But I loved hanging out with them and talking with them and learning from them. And hopefully they learn from me. And, it's just different being retired. I work a lot out in the yard. I've got a nice garden. I love dealing with plants, that kind of stuff. In fact, I took a job working at a landscaping company down the street from here because I love dealing with plants and that kind of stuff so much, and ended up tearing my labrum when I was working there, so I had to stop. But yeah, it's nice. I can be home. I can make sure there's dinner on the table when my wife gets home. She loves her job, and I want to support her in that as best I can. My daughter's getting ready to graduate. I can help her with that. She rides horses and does all these things there. I can help with that whenever she will let me. And then the little man, does his thing, and I can be a part of all of that stuff all at the same time. I have to worry about being gone for it. I mean, I missed watching my son learn how to walk and sit up and a lot of those things for that deployment to Afghanistan. And it's kind of hard when you get back and your son looks at you like, who's that? Why is that man trying to hold me? Those kinds of things. I'm sure you've experienced some of that stuff, some of the demanding jobs that we have, but it's nice. It's nice to be able to be home. But I'm also getting bored. So, do you hear
So I
my
see
dog just then? He let us know that he's moving around.
So before I ask the last question, I want to make sure that there wasn't anything that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about or want to bring up.
No, I mean the only thing that I really like I told you at the front, I don't really know what to do with compliments too well, but I do like the idea that I made a difference. I hope that I did. I don't know if I did or not, but I also knew that every time I ever got cocky, I tended to make mistakes, and I learned that lesson on the rifle range. Like I'm shooting good, and then pretty soon you dropped around, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna fail. I'm gonna really have a hard time here. So I tried not to ever get cocky like that, and try to be as realistic as I could. But I don't know. I hope that the Marines are better for me having been in the Marine Corps. I hope the Marine Corps is better for me having been in the Marine Corps. And that's really the only thing that you can hope for. And that's what I look back and yeah, I hope that came to fruition.
I can say with a resounding, at least for me, that you had a huge impact on me, my career, I mean, even my life. And so I personally thank you so much for that and being you. And I will ask the last question, which is if you had to take the oath again, would you?
1,000 times. No hesitation. It was the best decision I ever made. Because like I said, I was partying and hanging out with friends, my late 20s. I wasn't really doing anything. I was just kind of existing and, eating food and things like that. It just didn't seem to really make an impact. And Marine Corps gave me a wonderful wife. It gave me two wonderful kids. I've got my children's education paid for. I'm able to do a lot of things. I have a lot of skills. I need to actually go start applying for jobs. I'm pretty sure I have a lot of skills that are marketable. But no regrets at all. No regrets. I wish I'd done it when I was 18.
This is the Oath We Took podcast, and you just heard a piece of Brian's story. You now know one more Marine and one more piece of Marine Corps history. His sacrifices matter. His stories matter. Not every Marine story is the same. We didn't all join the military for the same reason. What is the same is the oath we all took. An oath that easily could have ended in death, and for some, it did. So listeners, instead of asking you to thank a Marine for their service, I am going to challenge you to continue to listen to their stories instead.